I wish I were in the same room with you because I'm trying to get a sense of how people are right now. On Zoom, I see Billy is taking a sip of water. And how's the weather over there internally? So right away, bring awareness. I hope you've been doing that throughout the entire evening, both practicing being awareness in community as we do the chanting, taking vows, renewing our aspirations, practicing in silence, that we're continuing to pay attention, mindfulness to what's happening inside ourselves. And we could lean into the Sangha, to the community when we're not feeling quite well or distracted or feeling restless, to know that that's okay too. I want to say that right off the bat because um, I'm just remembering when I was doing tranquility type of meditation where I'm trying to bring the mind to the present moment. Sometimes it's just very restless, very anxious, and it's hard to do that. And it's okay if it's like that. I think when I first began my practice, I thought, no, I'm a bad meditator. Everyone else seems so still and so lovely, and why can't I keep still? And then I'm realizing with years of practice that actually what brings ease is actually letting go of that critical voice. We chanted the Brahma Viharas, that having the loving heart to meet whatever's coming up with a sense of friendliness. Sometimes what's coming up is tightness in the body, or the mind is proliferating on something because we're worried, and to meet that with compassion. Or maybe you got a promotion, something good happened with your kids or something, and good, meet that with joy. And the way that those are offered is to relax with that. To bring a sense of like right now, just take a deep exhalation, inhale. Just everybody take an exhalation. There's so many things in our lives that we're not in control of, including this body and this mind. And that's where we get to equanimity, the last of the four Brahma Viharas. It's continuing to be a heart of love that meets these places and ourselves and each other, the world, when we feel helpless, we're just not in full control of what's happening. But we can be with that, with a sense of that equanimity. So that's just one way for me to connect with you guys right now. It wasn't what I had planned to talk about, but it's all connected because that's kind of what the Buddha's teachings are about. The story about the Acrobat Sutta, I don't know if you've seen any of these Chinese acrobat shows. Maybe you could look at it. I don't have an image to show you, but I've seen them where on stage there'll be somebody twirling. Sometimes you see people balancing each other on top of each other, or even in circus, right? You see like 7 people stacked on each other. Like, how do they do that? In this Acrobat Sutta, it was said in the time of the Buddha, and in the village square there are people are watching these acts, and it's very festive. And one of the acts is these two acrobats were, one balanced on top of the other. And I think the balancing plates also, oh no, there's a bamboo pole actually between the two of them. They have to climb up. So imagine that, even just climbing up, how do you not fall down? And how precarious is that? So this is the simile, this is the example that the Buddha gave to teach about relationships. I think of relationships as places where we could probably have the greatest love and joy and happiness, but it's also where that the worst thing can happen too. The worst sadness, the rupture, the stress can also come from relationships. So the Buddha is teaching through the sutta this example of the acrobat, how to be with each other, how to meet this precariousness of relationality. We're in it all the time. And how do we do that? So here's the story. I'm just going to read the story because I think you'll hear it. It's a nice way. This is a nice translation from the scholar named Andrew Olensky. He translated this way. Once in ancient India, a bamboo acrobat set up his bamboo pole in the center of a village, climbed up the pole with great agility, and balanced carefully upon its tip. He then invited his young assistants to scamper up and stand on his shoulders, saying to her, "You look after my balance, my dear, and I'll look after your balance." With us thus looking after one another and protecting one another, we'll show off our craft and receive some payment and safely come down the bamboo pole. The girl said, "No, master, that will never do. You must look after your own balance, and I will look after my own balance. And with each of us thus looking after ourselves and protecting ourselves, we'll show off our craft, receive some payment, and safely come down the bamboo pole." And the Buddha said, so the assistant's name is Frying Pan. The Buddha said, "What Frying Pan?" The assistant said to her master was right in that case. And the Buddhist told us that this looking after oneself, one looks after others. And looking after others, one look after oneself. So the Buddha goes on and said, how does one look after another? By looking after oneself. By practicing mindfulness, developing it, and making it grow. And here he's referring directly to the 4 foundations of mindfulness in the body, feeling, mind. And how does one look after oneself? By looking after another. By patience, by non-harming, by loving kindness and caring. So let me just repeat that one more time. Looking after oneself, one look after another. And looking after another, one looks after oneself. So how does one look after another? By looking after oneself. How do you do that yourself? Maybe you want to pause here. How do I look after myself? By looking after, so I can look after another. By practicing mindfulness, developing it, and growing it. And how does one look after oneself? By looking after others. By patience, the intentions of non-harming, loving kindness, and caring. If you just imagine right now embodying those qualities of the heart, sensing patience right now with yourself, sensing that wish not to harm any beings, including yourself. Sensing into metta, this loving kindness and friendliness towards all, whatever is coming up in yourself and in whatever you meet. And caring, the sense of deep care for this life. How is that in the body right now? Do you feel that? For me, there's a sense of warmth a sense of connection with another, a sense of aspiration to want to be super careful because we're all sensitive human beings. If I see another like myself, I know I am subject to harm. I am kind of vulnerable. I'm an emotional being, and another would be like that too. And there's a sense of strength and goodness that arises within. So I want to, I guess we'll give you an example of what happens. How do we harm ourselves, right? When we don't care for ourselves is one way, when we just act sort of carelessly and it's like, whatever. And, or when we even think that we're not worthy of love and care. We think other people's needs are more important than ours. That kind of comparison and judgment. That sets up a sense of separation, right? And it goes against it's kind of what the Buddha would call distorted thinking about the self. Because in fact, we're actually all interconnected. We can't live without each other. And also, what makes up who I am, the words I'm saying to you actually today, they don't come from me, they don't come from nowhere. They come from other teachers, other beings, from the Buddha's teachings that passed down for many years, from other spiritual teachers, from other practitioners. We're not even spiritual. There's good people, kind people, acts that I've received. Anyway, so this thing about not comparison is underneath that is the sense of separate self, and I think the sutta, this sense of being this image of this two acrobats completely depend on each other is an example how we are too with ourselves, with each other, with our loved ones, our roommates, our family, co-workers, the world, even our politicians right now, whether we like it or not. We're all coexist together. And it's very clear from the Acrobat Sutta, if we just take care of if the acrobats just look after themselves and they don't look after each other, they're going to fall, right? If they just look after each other, the other person, and they don't care for themselves and don't pay any attention to what they're doing, the whole thing will collapse. Tremendous danger, harm will be done. So a personal example, like I'm trying to practice patience. It's not easy. I think in my bio, you said I'm a mother. You know that I'm a mother of 4 kids. And, but even if you don't have kids, I think you know about patience and impatience. I drive fast when I'm impatient, when I feel like I'm late for something and I worry about that. I'm going to come across being unreliable. And, I eat when I'm anxious. I don't watch what I'm doing. It's like, oh, I'm just going to eat some junk food or whatever. This feels good. This temporary solution. And I'm also a fixer. If I get super anxious, I just want to fix and problem solve. And I'm just like driven. These are all examples of impatience. I put other drivers at risk, people on the road at risk when I drive fast. I put myself at risk. I put my body at risk when I eat junk food or I don't pay attention to how much of it I eat. And this sort of narrow tunnel vision I get when I'm super anxious and want to fix something, it's sort of railroad. It doesn't take into account other factors and perhaps the bigger reality of what's going on. It's scary, and my daughter has given me that feedback one time. And in fact, after that, it was scary for her when I'm like that. And one time I heard it, and I started practicing driving slowly, like actually intentionally practicing staying behind slow drivers, just to see what it's like, to notice what my mind does when it's driving slow. Like, yeah, just to practice patience. So, and lastly, I want to say is that, this practice is one of generosity. It is about how we give and how we offer ourselves to ourselves, how we relate to ourselves, and how we relate to others. And even if we just stay with patience, like what would that be like to offer ourselves patience? To offer another person as you leave tonight, patience. Maybe to me too, right now, maybe you're being very patient right now, listening to me, sitting there for quite some time. So you could also add whatever that you would like to practice: compassion, patience, non harm. So the Buddha would say that this is the better way to enlightenment, and check it out for yourself. Is this really the better way other than aggression and greed and deluded thinking, fake views? I'm going to invite you to try that out for yourself. So I'm going to invite a sound of the bell from here, and then I'll just pause. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much. Very inspiring. I think we can now open up if we have comments or questions to the speaker. Bow in and say your name. Keep it short. We have a good participation today, so let other people give everyone opportunity to participate. So again, thank you so much.
Then going in.
Yeah.
What I was thinking was that I ended up in the hospital twice in the emergency room and was hospitalized for 4 days, both times. And that was rock bottom for me. I realized how much I had neglected myself and how little compassion I had for myself. And I realized that if I can't have compassion for myself, I can't know what it is to have compassion for others. So that was an eye opener. Then bowing out.
Thank you for providing a real life experience.
I also want to mention that people online are also invited to participate, and Jake will make us aware if someone wants to share.
Please bowing in. Thank you for your talk. When you said about problem solving, that especially resonated for me. Sometimes that's the way that I try to demonstrate caring is I get in there and fix it or think that I'm fixing it. And when I'm doing that, I have realized that what I'm not doing is listening and really hearing. And so I try to like just sort of pause before I jump in, you know, with my super person cape on and try to resolve everything and just kind of try to listen and focus. But I never thought about that as a way of taking care of myself or others. And so there are a lot of ways to do that. And sometimes they aren't the obvious things. Thank you.
May I add, relax when you pause. That's helped me a lot when in those situations. Just remember to relax to whatever extent possible, even just to exhale. Yeah.
It's a new system. We don't usually use this version of it, so, but she should still be able to hear. I'm trying to reconnect it.
Willie bowing in. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Could you speak about this exercise for patients and relationships, maybe in the context of across different cultures or even languages? I'm Chinese American. My parents are immigrated from China. So any thoughts about exercising patience across pretty significant differences?
Yeah. So the question is about exercising patience with cultural differences, and perhaps you also mentioned the example with parents. Um, So that's a double gap there. There's both culture differences in terms of they're coming from China. You're much more culture-rated, perhaps, so cultural in that way. But there's also another gap that's a generation gap. So that's a double whammy. um, so the previous speaker talked about pause and relax. I added in that situation. And what happens with differences is that there will be I want to say attachment to views. There will be different points of views that we inherited, that we've been conditioned, in one country versus another, or one generation versus another. And those are things that they're conditioned because in that way that we can't just say, oh, we're not going to be this way. We so internalize them. And those of us who practice, meaning all of us here who practice awareness and mindfulness, have this opportunity to notice, to say, oh, what is it I'm acting out of? What is my view here? Just to be aware of that and to see how that comes into conflict, perhaps, with someone else's view. And this is, and then the question that I have to ask is, do you want to be right? Or do you want to have a relationship? Do you want to be right? Does that make sense? I think it comes in the context of a couple relation. I do some counseling with couples. It's like, do you want to be right or do you want to be married? Like, do you still? The idea is that it's kind of like they're just viewpoints, and in the Buddhist teachings, everything we fabricate, these viewpoints are just fabrications of the mind. Alex talked about the six sense doors, right? So that we have these ears, eyes, nose, the mouth. the body, and then there's the mind that's also in the Buddhist teachings, the sense doors. So these are just secretions or thoughts that will change. And it just depends on how attached we are to them and that the fact that they don't change. But I really love that you're willing to sort of, your question already says that you would like to bring patients into those places because in some way you know they're not personal, these cultural differences and generation gaps. And sounds like there's some desire to want to connect. And there's a big loss and sadness and grief when there isn't. I think that's all I'm going to say for now. Does that help? Does that answer? Or,
Yes, thank you.
okay. Thank you for your question.